Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 49 of the podcast. And it's January 5th, 2022, as we record this, our first episode this year. I'm excited.
Yay. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. What did you do over the New Year? I went to Port Townsend, as we talked about ad nauseum.
Lovely. I sat at home jealous that you were in Port Townsend. No, just a quiet, evening at home. You had a wonderful meal and just, rang in the new year that way.
Nice. Very cool. Well, you said that you wanted to talk about something specific today. So our topic today is the fracturing of the writing community. Does that sound like ominous or anything, or is that kind of what you wanted to go for?
I guess it can feel ominous. I think we're all a couple of years into, pandemic reality, and it's hard to think of things as, that is an ongoing part of our world, but I think it's something we have to acknowledge. We can talk a little bit about where the conversation came from, I guess.
Okay.
So between, in that kind of quiet week between Christmas and New Year's, I had the opportunity to just have some offline conversations with Eric Witchy. And some of the listeners may know Eric from Word Crafters and Willamette Writers, and he's a Willamette Pacific Northwest writer and teacher. And, we talked about a lot of things. He's a great person. It's a great person to pick their brain about topics. And
he's super smart.
Super smart. Yeah. We talked about, off the topic, we talked about things like attribution and point of view and artificial intelligence. So the conversation was varied, but one of the things we did a kind of a deep dive on is just where, our writing community is going into 2022. And if the people that know Eric know that he teaches a lot. You see him at Willamette Writers Conference, you see him in Word Crafters events, and up until 2020, that was in person. And we talked a lot about what happens to this community, or has happened to this community now that the in-person writing event has, by and large, been postponed or moved online, and just what that does to a community of people who already are more comfortable in their own space, in that introverted space. That's our opportunity to get out and meet each other. And in the interest of full disclosure, that's how you and I met, right? I mean, it was at a Willamette Writers event. So I think a lot, and I looked at a lot of my, what I would consider my writing connections, and a large percentage of those people came through, going to a conference, sitting in a class, rubbing elbows at a lunch table, and with that on hiatus, probably for another at least 6 months, if maybe the full year. We have to acknowledge that we have to get more creative as a community.
Yeah, and yes, when it comes to in-person events, I mean, I get excited about going to conferences so that I can be with my tribe and talk shop with people. But it also is out of my comfort zone. I hate small talk. I always feel really awkward, socially awkward, when I'm trying to talk with somebody that I don't really know, or somebody that I don't know at all. And so it is, for me, I enjoy going, but it is forcing myself to do something that's weird.
Right.
And so not going to conferences in the last couple of years, with a couple of exceptions, has been easy and lovely, but also there's a gap, like you were saying. It's easy to stay at home and not do the thing, for me.
Right. I think that's true for most people.
Yeah. And even, in the wintertime, I get depressed, and I have to fight against that. And I have a lot of tools in my tool belt. And some days I still just feel crappy.
Right.
And so when you combine that with, okay, I've got to, one of the tools in my toolbox for when I get that way is to just do it anyway, and just force myself to be with other people because my tendency is to like hole up under my blankets, go to sleep, or watch, binge watch Queer Eye or,
Nothing wrong
something
with
like that.
that.
Nothing wrong with that. And it's a way, it's self-care. It's the
Right,
way I
right.
get out of it. But I know a red flag for me is if I watch like 5 hours straight of something, or I watch like 2 movies in a row and not get up from the couch, like that's a red flag for me. And I
Right.
know that when I do that, I need to check myself. So not having to go to conferences and interact with people was kind of a nice break for me. But I feel like I'm in that like place where I'm kind of checking myself, like, all right, I need to force myself to go interact with people. And if I can't go to a conference, how can I do that? What can I
Right.
do? And that's where all the Zoom meetings came from, and the
Right.
parallel play with Eric Witchy.
And I think we can extend, I mean, we focused on conferences thus far, but if you're an independent author and you want to have a reading for your book, if the reading community that's a big part of like poets and experimental writers, people trying out their voice. Those events are largely, well, on hiatus. I think some people are getting creative with it by going outside, but you can extend it to all sorts of in-person meetings, writer groups,
Book
collaborative groups.
clubs,
Yeah, book clubs. Oh man, I mean,
critique
that's
groups.
right. Those things are all, they're shifting, and I do appreciate what you say about like this has probably given a lot of people some permission to not do the thing, and to say, okay, I don't have to force myself and out of my comfort zone, so I'm going to stay in whatever my comfort zone is. And I don't know, how do you feel about, when you said comfort zone, I immediately thought like part of what improves us as creatives and as entrepreneurs is getting a little bit out of that comfort zone and then coming back and reorganizing around that new feeling of, okay, I can do this, right? So how do you feel getting out of your comfort zone works for you as you are steadily improving your craft and your tribe and all of those things? Is it important for you to get out of that comfort zone?
Absolutely, because strangely, or maybe not so strangely, my comfort zone is thinking a lot, planning a lot, but sometimes the action part of it I stall at. And okay, let's just get real here. one of my issues, challenges is not feeling professional enough and not being prepared enough to look professional to my audience. And I've really been working hard the last couple of years on learning with my audience,
Right.
or learning in public, I guess is a better way to say it. And then that's okay. And sometimes, especially in like the coaching community, people want to know that you're real and that you're
Right.
not some robotic, yes, and so I think that forcing myself to take action is the way to improve for me.
Right. Right. I
Yeah.
agree.
And I have lots of ideas about how to do that and have only done some of them out of
Right.
fear of just looking bad or whatever. So, for example, I decided that I was going to, I belong to a smallish mastermind group. There's probably it's an online group. There's probably 100 people in it, maybe, I don't know. And I was going to present like a little mini workshop to anybody that wanted to come, this end of the year review, how to do an end of the year review. And that's hard to plan for the future, for the next year, unless you've done this review process first.
Right.
And so I contacted the organizer and said, hey, what do you think about me doing this little workshop? And she said, great. Why don't you do it at the town hall, which is this much bigger event on the online space in this community. And because lots more people will be there. And
Right.
yeah, so that was like, oh no, that's a little bit more than I was, shooting for, but I'm going to do it, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be
You're gonna
great.
be fine. You're gonna be fine.
But yeah, that was definitely me, like, okay, taking action. And for me also, sometimes taking action is jumping in without thinking, which
Right.
seems contraindicated to the way I prefer things. I prefer to think things out and just plan it all out and get it all set and then present. But I sometimes talk myself out of it in the
Right.
process. And so sometimes I have to just like cut myself off and volunteer.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to do this thing, put it out there to the
Right.
world.
Well, I think you hit on two things that are always relevant to entrepreneurs and creatives and entrepreneurial creatives, creative entrepreneurs. Um, they can be one and the same, right? Join a pen.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's the imposter syndrome that you kind of alluded to, that you're never professional enough, you're never with it enough. And I think getting out of your comfort zone is a way to prove it to yourself. Not, you don't have to prove it to the world.
Hmm.
Um, in that instance, you have to prove to yourself, like, I belong here. I'm learning with my community. I'm sharing with my community. Um, and I think that getting out of your comfort zone does that. And then you also suggested control. That's the planning. For me, when I get too much into the planning, I recognize, like, I am trying to control everything
Yeah.
about my business, about my creative life, about my personal life. And the more control, you have to have some control. And it's a sticky um, place to be in. You can't just leave everything, but getting out and getting in front of a microphone, getting in front of a class, or sitting in a class is a way to seed some of that control and to trust that the community's there. It's, we're growing together, we're moving together, we're doing these things simultaneously. And I just think it's a struggle right now to get the same quality of communal support when we're doing that
Online.
online.
So what do you do, Eric, to maintain that connection to your writing community? And also, and maybe this is the same thing, but what kind of self-care do you do when the mental isolation gets too much?
Well, I'll take the second one. That actually felt really scripted. That was really good. I like that.
It was
um,
not.
it was a great transition. Yeah, well, but I'll take the second one first, and that is, self-care is a challenge because because there's more of it. You have to do more of it because I think we're just all pressed a little harder. Um,
For sure.
so for me, it's, the self-care is, I get frustrated. I get frustrated that there's only so much of a bar I can hit without the in-person element. Um, that was a big part of my 2020 plan. So my first self-care step is I have to give that. I have to just let that go. And I
Ditch the
have to feel
plan.
the frustration, feel it, and then just let it go. Because
Hmm.
the frustration is real, but you can't live with it forever. So I have to just recognize it and let it go, recognize it, let it go. What I've done, I mean, I didn't do any of these steps really, intentionally. On reflection, I've joined, Eric Witchy's Parallel Play group, which is, a 4 times a week online writers group that simulates kind of people writing together. That, going into 2020, I would have said, this is silly, I wouldn't do this, but now it's necessary.
Hmm.
Um, and it's being open to doing new things, because that connection um, isn't as easy as it was. It isn't as scripted as it was. I used to just look at the writers magazines and boards and say, oh, I want to go to that conference, I'll try out that conference. I'll Can't do it.
Hmm.
So you have to make these opportunities, right? And I think collaborating with other writers, not something I would do, but now, because it just gives that communal feeling that we're writing this together, um, that's helpful. It's something,
Hmm.
and so I would urge people to, I think, find that connection, um, get over the fact that, yes, it's online, or it's not the way you wanted it, or get past that part and then just recognize this is what you have for now.
Yeah. And a lot good can come from that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
There are jobs that I've gotten from my online community. There's friendships I've made. Um, there's business opportunities that have come up because of that. And I've become a better writer because I'm checking in with my community and learning from them, learning together,
Right.
writing together.
Yeah.
So I really like my online master. It's called the Author Success Mastermind,
Okay.
and it's just a monthly payment. And there's writing rooms and classes, and there's a lot of tutorials on there's a lot of content there that you can work through by yourself, but then there's a lot of chatter, through the Slack channel.
Right.
And so, yeah, I really, that's really helped me in the last 2 years. Totally.
Yeah. And I think it's part of that is like, would you have done that 3 years ago when all options were open to you? I mean,
No,
yeah,
probably not,
probably not.
but you're right. Like, this is what we have for now.
Yeah.
And it might end up being, at this point, I can't imagine like dropping out.
Right. Right.
But there will be a period of time where we're going to be able to be doing more things in public with people, in-person events, and that will take up some of that online time.
Right.
But I kind of feel like when I was volunteering at the Willamette Raiders conference last year, and I had done it for another conference as well, there was a lot of conversation about this hybrid approach to conferences now, and that more and more people are asking for the option to do an online versus an in-person, and that more people could attend the online event for various reasons,
Right.
disabilities, and just having kids at home, not having the money to go,
Right. The expense of travel and accommodations is
right.
enormous. So
Right. So there's a lot more options right now. And because we kind of saw 2022 as okay, finally, we're going to have the event now. We're going to have the conference now that's been off for years, or whatever that is, conference or event or gathering. Now that Omicron is happening too, like, I don't know, you were saying before we started recording that maybe those will be canceled too, or some of them already are. You've picked out
right.
things that you wanted to go to do that you don't know if it's actually going to happen. So I like the direction that some of these organizations are going, and making both of those options available. I still prefer in-person events because of the energy, because of the networking. I find it really difficult to network on a Zoom room. Like, it really bothers me. I have a hard time with that. But it's something, and it's our world right now, so.
Well, and I think you hit on something that's kind of a key to, kind of summarize the whole thing, is that going forward, all these things will pass in some way, shape, or form. I mean, Omicron will come and go, something else will crop up, but when the world returns to that semi-normal state or some version of normal, like, I don't know, those have become buzzwords, I think, drive people crazy. But when we return to a more balanced menu of options, I think we have to recognize that the online world has infiltrated what had been an in-person experience: the conference, the writing group, the book club, the reading, the book release. All of those are pillars of the literary and creative community. And I don't see us going back to conferences, like you said, that are exclusively in person. I think even if you're having a book release, you're going to have to do some sort of you're going to have to do something on a video, to
Yeah,
engage.
Facebook Live or YouTube Live or something.
And I think that's great because
I do
you
too.
talked, yeah, we talked about comfort zone. That is not in all of our comfort zones, or maybe any of ours at this point.
Hmm.
But that
We've
adaptation,
lost our abilities.
yeah, God, I think it's regathering ourselves around what will come, and then the new thing will work. I mean, the new thing has to work because the community itself isn't going to go away. It just has to heal and
Adapt.
reform.
Yeah. Um, I am going to do a shameless plug for my in-person writing retreat this summer. And why I really like it and why I created it was because I did want that in person. When I looked back over 2020 and how much grief there really was, like I never got sick. Nobody I knew was deathly ill.
Right.
And I was super safe. I didn't lose my job. There was a lot of things to be grateful for, but I
Right.
still at the end of the year felt, well, embarrassed to still have that grief.
Right.
But it was still there. And I think a large part of it was that low level anxiety and stress. And some of that came from the isolation and
Right.
not being with your friends and not making new friends and not going to the conferences or doing the conferences online, which is just as stressful for me
Right. Yeah.
in terms of energy level and stuff. And so, yeah, I really craved the idea of meeting with people safely. And so this conference, this writing retreat is very small. There's only 10 tickets total to sell. There's 8 left right now. And everybody has their own dwelling if they want it. There's 2 opportunities to have shared if you want to cut the cost. But the dwelling itself is very large. So you're still going to have social distance inside the dwelling if you choose to share one. And it's outside the whole time. So there's all of the safety built into it. Everybody's wearing masks still if you're around, like when we're eating, and the staff there wears masks when they're serving food. So I just feel like it was a really safe way to be in community
Right.
and still get to talk shop. And, everybody needs a retreat right now.
Right. Well, you hit something that was interesting too. Like there's however fortunate you feel. I mean, I think this is just to address the whole COVID phenomenon in general, is like,
Mhm.
I didn't get sick, I didn't lose my job, I'm in the same boat, but there was this ongoing feeling of grief. Like it's odd because none of that was localized to my experience. I just kind of was stressed and grieved over things that were out of my world, and that's a really hard feeling because you can't do anything. You're helpless. So
Well, I think that for a lot of people in this generation, we haven't experienced a lot of collective grief before.
right.
And so that I think is what was weird
Right.
also.
No, it's true.
There's been other generations that have suffered collective grief.
Right.
And my family has never been in well, that's not true. I was going to say it has never been in a war, but my dad was in Vietnam. But,
Right.
There hasn't been. Yeah, I
Yeah.
lead a pretty sheltered life,
Right.
actually.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, the last 100 years in our history, we've had world wars and depressions, and this is our sort of collective grief moment, and it's new for us. But
Mhm.
not to bring it back to a writer
Yeah.
perspective. um, there's a lot of great books that get written about that collective grief state, so you talk about like books about World War I and World War II, and stories around Vietnam, and stories around the Depression. These are cultural lightning rods, historical lightning rods, experience that give us something to, I don't know, I guess something to kind of imbue our stories with, because that collective isn't really something you can fabricate. It's like, has to be, to me, it has to be real. And so, I'm hopeful of 2 things: that there's writers out there that are saying, you know what, I've got to do something different. I I I held out in 2020 to do something that I wanted to do, and I was waiting through 2021. Now's the time. You know, there's just the going back to the way things were when you created your vision isn't likely. So finding a way to meld your story, you know, your creative process with what is new is, I think it's a necessity. And then just recognize that maybe, you know, if you have that story that's part of that collective experience, you are, by all means, share it and write it, because
Mhm.
that collective experience, I think we're all trying to make sense of. And, you know, you and I are doing it right now. It's been almost 2 years, and
And we're working together.
we are. Yeah, this
Yay.
comes out of
This
that
is,
too, right?
yeah,
This is
this is a collaborative thing. I used to do this by myself.
right. Not anymore.
Not anymore. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And I'll see you next week. Is there anything
Absolutely.
you want to say before we close? I feel like
I
we've
think it's
touched on
spelled it all right
everything.
there. I don't know if there's much more to add.
So self-care has been, for both of us, like doing things collaboratively,
Right.
checking in with our writing community through like timed Zoom writing events,
Right.
mastermind groups, the TASM mastermind group that I'm in in-person events when they're safe.
Right.
Yeah, the bookstore I work at is just now starting to like do one event a month, you know, where everyone's masked and they check the vaccination cards at the door, you know, so there's a little bit of a safety net there.
Right.
So we're still kind of dipping our toe in and keeping the events small, but and not doing very many of them. But yeah, we'll wait it out and see what
Well,
we
you
can
do.
do.
You kind of hit on something there too, and maybe it's just another. We can probably keep having this conversation for another hour, but I think that if it's not comfortable for you, you know, if you,
Mhm.
I think we talk about getting out of your comfort zone, but there is a point at which, like, there's a point where getting out of your comfort zone fosters creativity, and there's a point where getting out of your comfort zone can set you back.
Yeah.
So you talked about, you know, if what Valerie is describing, if what you're describing, you know, a masked event, distance with cards still doesn't feel comfortable for you, you're probably not going to get the spirit of that event. You're, you know, so I think finding a comfort zone and not pushing past every, you know, every point of of comfort. You don't have to do that. That's not a necessity. There's no points for bravery on this. Um, but there is points for courage. And I think if you say, yes, I can do that, then by all means go to the bookstore and go to that event, and you'll probably benefit from it. So
Yeah.
anxiety is tough.
It
Anxiety
is.
is really difficult.
And it shows up differently in everybody, and everybody has a different range. And yeah,
Yeah,
it comes out differently and we treat it differently.
right, right. Well, writers, be good to yourself.
Yeah.
Go write that book.
Yeah. All right. You can always reach us on our various social media sites if you want to talk privately, or we have a Facebook group, the Writer Craft Facebook group. So you can always find us there. In the meantime, keep writing.
See you next week.
See you next week. Bye now.
Bye.